Hey everybody, are you going to Portugal? Are you going to be driving a car in Portugal? If so, you've got to watch this video. I've got the 10 best tips for driving on the roads in Portugal. We are Dennis and Min. Come join us on our traveling adventures around the world. All right, welcome to the channel. I'm going to be giving you 10 great tips for driving in the country of Portugal, which also include those islands of the Azores as well as Madeira. And keep in mind, this is coming from an American US perspective. If you're coming from a country where, like in Ireland, where they drive on the opposite side of the road, keep in mind there's going to be some differences there. But as an example, from an American perspective, in Portugal, they drive on the same side of the road as we do in the US, so that makes it very easy. All right, so please, before we get right into the first tip, please like and subscribe to our channel. That really will help us grow. And if you do so right now, I will show you a picture of Jesus driving in Portugal. So before we get into tip number one, which is the type of car to drive in Portugal, I wanted to just mention that the comforting thing about Portugal, as I mentioned initially, is that they drive on the same side of the road. So that'll be very familiar. Secondly, they do also have the driver's side on the same side as the cars as you drive in the US. So nothing's going to be any different over there. So that's very good to know. And the third item also is that you are not going to need a international driver's license, at least at this point in mid-August 2024. You don't need any international driving license to drive or rent a car in Portugal. From whatever state that you're from, whether it's Hawaii, Alabama, New York, California, that driver's license that you have is going to be sufficient. And also you will need to show your passport as well when you're renting a car. So just that state ID or state driver's license and your passport, and you're good to go with renting a car. All right, so first, tip number one on how to drive in Portugal is the car itself. So chances are you're gonna be having to rent a car. And if you're coming from any of the major airports in Portugal, you're gonna have many options for different types of cars and brands that you can choose from. Pretty reasonable prices, especially in comparison to the US, and a lot of familiar brand names of cars, but there's gonna be some names that you probably have never heard of before. It doesn't mean that they're bad cars, they're just European made and they market those specific brands more so in the European Union and abroad, maybe just not so much in the US. But you're gonna see Audis, you're gonna see BMWs, you're gonna see Volkswagen and Nissan. So a lot of good brands. You're gonna have to choose between either an automatic or a stick shift, right, or manual. And so do know that in Portugal, there's quite a few places where it's very hilly. There's some very long grades, and the stick shifts are generally going to be a little bit better than the automatic cars for that purpose. But some of you may be very comfortable driving an automatic, and so that might be an easier option for you. Do note that with my experience, if you are going to be renting an automatic versus a stick shift, you may, not necessarily across the board, but you may find yourself having to pay a little bit more of a rate for that automatic car. Now, the other thing too is that they are, I don't know what year this went into effect, but I don't know, it's kind of crazy. I think the guy at the car dealership was explaining that they've pretty much outlawed four-cylinder cars and above. So Portugal, like a lot of places in the European Union, are striving for all this green energy, which is fine. I've got a few words about green energy. And that's all I'm gonna say about that. But most of the cars that are newer, you're gonna find are only 3 cylinders. So they do have a lot of, pickup and get up and go, but certainly not like the 4, 6, 8-cylinder cars that you might be accustomed to in the US. So for that reason, again, the stick shifts tend to be a little bit more have more pickup for those hilly areas when you're going up in long grades and such. So just something to keep in mind with regards to the type of car that you're gonna be renting. Now, the other aspect is if you are going to be getting a gas-powered car, they have electric vehicles and they also have diesel and they also have regular petrol or gas. And when you go to fill up at a gas station, please note that you're going to have to go to the gas station and choose the option 95. Generally, that's going to be the most widely used option for filling up your petrol. Your gas tank is 95, and it'll be having the green option when you're there at the pump. So just keep that in mind. Sometimes it can be very confusing because you don't want to be putting diesel in your gas-powered car or your electric car. I don't know how you would do that. But just note that those are some things that are different than what you're going to find in the US. All right, so tip number 2 on how to drive when in Portugal has to do with the toll roads. Now, before I get into the toll roads, I want to mention that if you're coming from the US, driving in Portugal, everything is in kilometers, okay? So all the speed limit signs are going to be in kilometers. Most likely the car that you're renting is going to be in kilometers. And so the distances between cities, right, how far to get from where you're at to the next town, the town after that, it's all in kilometers. So you may want to brush up a little bit on what that conversion is to miles, so that way you can understand that a little bit better. But as long as you're staying within the speed limit posted in kilometers to what you're driving, you should be okay for that. So getting into the toll roads, there's a lot of toll roads throughout the country of Portugal. I love that because I'm expecting that the roads are going to be maintained very well. And I'm happy to say that from my experience, having driven all over the country, they maintain the roads immaculately there. Everything is very well lit, even at nighttime. And then you also have very good signage, directing you to, when to take the off-ramp and the exits. And so very happy to see that. Whereas in Hawaii, we pay a lot of taxes and the roads are really not maintained well at all. So that's where I'm coming from. So the roads are beautiful to drive on in Portugal. Don't mind paying for those tolls. So mind you, when you rent a car there, they will give you the option, with my experience, that you can pay these tolls individually as you use them, as you go through those stations, or you can take advantage of a program called Via Verde, and that is where you get a car that already has an existing tracker, so to speak. I don't know what you call it, a thingy that will let the toll station know when you are driving through. It automatically tags that car as being able to be connected to their system, where you don't have to physically put out your credit card or pay euros into the toll booth. Okay, you can just drive right on through, and then that will get charged to your account. So either through the rental agency, and if you live in Portugal and you set up your own account online, which you certainly can do, then it just automatically is debiting your bank account as you are driving through these tolls throughout the country. So it's very, very convenient to do the Via Verde. And so again, remember, when you are renting a car, they'll usually ask you if you want that option. That's what we used. And then they also have some areas where they have these overhead electronic tolls where you're just driving and you don't have to slow down. You just automatically get hit with that. But again, that will all get recorded through the rental agency that you are renting from. So that's a good overview about the toll situation. Now, when you're going into a section where you see a toll sign, you're going to want to slow down. And unless you have Via Verde, you're going to grab from the booth, when you stop at the toll booth, a ticket. And then you're going to hold on to that ticket. And then that will be utilized again wherever you are closest to exiting, what town or city you're going to, and you exit, there'll be that toll station where you're going to insert your ticket into that toll booth. And some of them have attendants there, and there'll be signs that if you want an attendant, you can go through that lane. There's other lanes where you can just pay by credit card. Other lanes allow you to pay by cash. So you do have many options. And so if you do pay by credit card, you can just tap your card right there, and then they'll give you a receipt as well. The arm will open up, and then you're free to go. Again, if you have the Via Verde, there's no arm, right? With those designated lanes, you are going to just go straight on through, and they will go ahead and charge you again automatically into your account through the rental agency, or if you have your own account. All right, tip number 3 for driving in Portugal, and this is an important one. Do not drive in the fast lane, okay? Do not drive in the fast lane. So generally when you're on the highway or the freeway, or really anywhere where there's 2 lanes, right? There's a slow lane and then there's a fast lane, right? You always drive in the slow lane, okay? Drive in the slow lane. The only time you're gonna get yourself in that fast lane is if you're passing another vehicle. That's it, okay? Because if you're just driving along, minding your own business in the fast lane, and there's another car right next to you in the slow lane, and you're going about the same speed together, right? Where nobody from behind you could pass, and you're in the fast lane, your rear bumper will have a new friend. Yes, because they will let you know that you are not supposed to be just driving leisurely in that fast lane. There's a reason it's called the fast lane, and they definitely use that. So always stay clear of that fast lane unless you're passing another vehicle, okay? Stay in that slow lane, okay? I can't emphasize that enough, okay? The Portuguese people are so friendly and nice, except I think when they see somebody driving in the fast lane and they're not driving very fast. All right, driving in Portugal, tip number 4 is roundabouts. All right, now I love roundabouts. If you're coming from the US, we don't have a lot of those. And in Hawaii, I can probably count on one hand the number on the island of Oahu. And it's great because, you know, you can actually drive miles and miles and miles, hundreds of kilometers in Portugal without stopping, because of these roundabouts, right? You never have to really stop. There are some 4-way, 5-way signal areas where, you know, there's light signals, but for the most part, a lot of the intersections you're gonna come across in Portugal are roundabouts. So don't think if you're coming from the US that, oh, seen one roundabout, seen them all, I know how to navigate around those. I thought I did, I had it wrong. So I'm gonna post a graph here to help you understand how to navigate your way through and around these roundabouts, depending upon how soon you're going to be exiting. So if sometimes there's 3, 4, 5 exits, right, within one roundabout. So if you're gonna be entering the roundabout and you know you're exiting the very next right turn where you can turn right, you're gonna stay in that right lane. Generally, if you're going to be exiting in the second or the third or the fourth exit from that roundabout, then you are going to want to stay towards the center lane of that roundabout. So remember in Portugal, you have roundabouts that will have, as you're entering that roundabout, there could be 2, 3, 4 lanes sometimes entering that roundabout, which means you've got 4, maybe 5 lanes going around that roundabout. You see that a little bit more in the busier cities like Lisbon, but it can be a little hairy, and that's why you really need to know how to navigate these roundabouts, especially in these busier sections of cities like Faro and Lisbon and Porto, because it can get a little bit crazy. Outside of the big cities, you're going to be limited to maybe 2 or 3 are going to be very common. But even with those, it's important to make sure you're staying in the right lane and be using your blinker also. If you're going to be exiting right away, if you're not going to be exiting right away, people put their left turn signal on, right, to let people around them know that, hey, I'm not getting out this roundabout just yet. Okay, so do take a picture or whatever you got to do of this image so you can really understand the right way to navigate these roundabouts in Portugal. But let them be your friend, because it really is a nice way to get through in and around these towns and cities. All right, Tip number 5 when driving in Portugal. Like a lot of places, you're going to see many crosswalks, especially as you were into these towns and cities. And unlike other parts of Europe that I've been to, other parts of the world where there's not a lot of respect for pedestrians in a crosswalk or not in a crosswalk. In Portugal, there is what I see from coming from Hawaii, a lot of aloha for people that are crossing the street. People, especially that are taking the time to find a crosswalk and navigate across. Almost always, without exception, the locals are going to stop for the pedestrians to cross and always keep a very safe environment. So I really love that about the local population is unlike other countries I've been to in Europe, you're putting your life at risk by going into the street, whether it's a crosswalk or not. But in Portugal, they have a lot of respect for the pedestrians. So just make sure you're keeping an eye out for people that are getting ready or already in the crosswalk. Sometimes you have that blind spot, right, with the car in front of you, and they are shielding the pedestrians. But you see they're stopping, they're slowing down, you see the brake lights on. Please, please, please. Better to be safe than sorry. Just anticipate that there's probably something going on. Somebody's crossing the street. Do slow down because those blind spots, I've seen it happen, can be deadly. So when you see somebody in front of you that's slowing down, there's probably a good reason for that. Okay, so that's a great tip. And know that when you're in Portugal, you definitely want to stop for pedestrians crossing in the crosswalk. All right, tip number 6 when driving in Portugal. They have in a lot of these metro areas, the small towns, the small cities, and certainly the big cities, like anywhere else. They have a lot of these areas where it's paid parking. And so what you're typically going to find, once in a while there'll be an attendant somewhere, but for the most part, you're going to see a parking sign with a large P on a blue sign, and that will let you know that you're in a paid parking area. And there are going to be these stations that you have to go to. It might not be right where you park your car. You might have to walk 10, 20, 30 yards perhaps to get to the little station, the little booth, but they're automated. And all you do is you just press the big green button in the middle generally is what you do, and that kind of like activates it, turns it on from sleep mode, and then you just go ahead and drop in the amount of euros. Not going to put in your US coins, your euro coins for how long you are going to be there. So generally, again, this is going to vary from one town to the next, but €1 might be for 1.5 to 2 hours. Some of them have a minimum amount of time that you have to stay there, so or a minimum euro amount, which may be 30 cents, 30 euro cents, and then it goes up from there. So there'll be a chart that lets you know how much you put in, how much time that's going to give you, and then it's going to spit out a little receipt, and then you go back to your car, and it's important you put that on the dashboard. So that way people that are going to be monitoring that parking area, all they have to do is just look at your dashboard and they can see that you've got a paid ticket. And also on that paid ticket is the time, the expiration time of when you're supposed to be out of there. So as long as you know to get back by that time, you're good. If you think you're going to be exceeding that time, you just go back to that parking station and you go ahead and put in another 30, 50 cents or another euro, and that'll give you that additional amount of time. Okay? If you should get a ticket like I did one time, it's not a big deal. There are designated places, little offices that you can go to nearby in that town and pay that parking fee. I think I paid €3 for which was my parking ticket. So unlike the US where it can be, $15, $20, $30 or more, it's pretty reasonable over there. So don't stress out if you do get a parking ticket. It's going to be pretty easy to take care of. Just ask a local there in the town, and it'll certainly be fairly inexpensive. Okay, and tip number 7 is familiarize yourself with the road signs in Portugal. You're going to find signs that you do not see at home in the US. So it's a good idea before you go on your trip to go online or I'm going to put a graph here where you can get an idea of what some of these signs look like and what they're directing you to do or not to do. So it's really important because some of these smaller towns have these signs, and you know some of them are one-way streets, and it's not always easy to know which ones are one-way, which ones are not, which ones are no access at all. So definitely get familiar with these road signs. And if you travel to the island of Madeira, a place that is dear to our hearts, you're going to find yourself driving through a lot of tunnels. They're really amazing marvels, how they engineered all these tunnels through these mountains of volcanic rock some years ago on this island in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. But note that if you are going to Madeira, Portugal, they have a lot of windy roads and they have a lot of tunnels. And if you're not used to driving in tunnels, it might freak you out a little bit at first. So just warning you now that if you're driving a car in Portugal, renting for the first time, prepare yourself. I don't know how, mentally at least, to be able to drive through some of these tunnels that can go on for, I don't know, minutes at a time. You're in the dark. So it shouldn't stop you from going. Like I said, they're well lit, but they exist. All right, and tip number 8 on how to drive in Portugal is ask yourself when you are renting a car, if you're booking something online, do you really need that big vehicle? Do you really need that big SUV, right? Or that Range Rover, right? Whatever it might be. If there's a lot of people in your party, or you have a lot of luggage, you may not have a choice. But do note that throughout Portugal, you are going to be in a lot of towns and cities, whether it's Lisbon or anywhere else outside of Lisbon, they all have their older, historic, original centers of town, right? And so you're going to notice that when these towns were built, the cars did not exist. They had horses, right? So some of them are about as narrow as a horse to go through these walls on either side of you. And if you have a small enough car, if it's compact enough, you can probably make your way through. But some of these streets they're not made for cars in the first place. But if there's cars that do utilize these small streets, they are small on the compact size. So don't get stuck, right? Just try not to go down some of these streets. It's not worth it, even if you have to back out. But you're going to find yourself probably more times than not having to do just that. But better to be safe than sorry. Don't think that, my car is going to get through this, because some of these roads, they get narrower and narrower and narrower, and then you see your mirrors on the side of your car are within a centimeter or two of these walls on either side. So don't take it that far. It's not worth it. Even if there's 2 or 3 cars behind you that are smaller, they're like, what is this guy doing? You just got to back out. Don't damage your car. It's not worth it. All right, getting through. Number 9, driving tip in Portugal is GPS. Okay. Don't count on GPS. Oh my gosh. I bought a brand new car in Portugal, and you would think that its GPS would be as awesome and up to date and current as they get. No. I was really disappointed, actually. So this GPS takes me all over places that I don't want to go. So I don't even use my own car's GPS anymore. If you have an iPhone like I do, you have that pre-installed map, right? I don't know if it's an iPhone map or whatever, but that is not reliable either. I think Waze, I've had better success with Waze, W-A-Z-E. They do use that there. And I think I have to get better at the Google Map option or app, because I think that's a little bit more reliable as well. drop a comment. Let me know what you've used in Portugal, if you've been there before, using GPS and what seems to work well for you. Because yeah, I've touched on Waze and Google, and they seem to be much better than the other alternatives that I mentioned. But just be very careful with GPS and your timing. Allow extra time to get places for that reason, because the GPS is not always reliable. If you are looking for the name of a town, it might take you an hour or 2 hours in a totally different direction, because the name of that town is also the name of a restaurant, 2 hours away, and that's where it's going to take you. I mean, I've had that kind of stuff happen before, and it happens to everybody. So just remember that the GPS is not always 100% reliable, and do double check the options that are available in the different routes that are offered. All right, winding down, tip number 10 for how to drive in Portugal is simply this: just drive and have a wonderful time. Hopefully when you go to Portugal or you're living in Portugal, you're kind of into that laid-back lifestyle that the locals have, and just enjoy the scenery. There's so much beauty to see, and don't let that pass you by when you're driving around throughout Portugal. And do remember that when you are in the bigger cities, do expect some traffic. But when you're outside of cities like Lisbon and Faro and Porto, there's really very little traffic, if any. So it's really such a wonderful thing to drive there in Portugal and not have to deal with traffic. You rarely see road construction. Like I said, somehow, some way, these roads are beautifully maintained, but it's not like they're tying up traffic and merging lanes all over the place to do that. So somehow they just make it very, very efficient. So that sums up our top 10 tips on how to drive in Portugal. Thank you for sharing your comments with us. And please, if you haven't already, wasn't that an awesome picture of Jesus driving in Portugal? Please, if you haven't yet, like and subscribe to our channel. And if there's any tips, driving tips that I missed, please let me know, share them in the comments so I can update this video at a later time, so we can keep those that are going to Portugal, especially from the US, informed about what these important tips might be for them as they navigate around the country. Thanks everybody, and we'll see you next time.